part of the Leeds School of Business. And Sandra Fish is one of our instructors at School of Journalism. And last semester they taught, how about getting the name right? It was Adventures in Entrepreneurial Journalism?
Something like that. Entrepreneurial Adventures in Journalism. Next fall will be Entrepreneurial Adventures in Media.
Okay. So,
To let the advertising students feel more inclusive.
Can this be turned off?
yeah, that's
Or the, something like that, because that's really distracting. You know, you're blue. Okay, good.
How's that?
I guess I wanted to start off by talking a little bit and asking you to share an anecdote from our class, because one of the things I think we haven't talked much about is that there's this audience out there / end customer, and I think that that's got to be a concern. Like, I think a lot of your organizations are reselling your product or distributing it through other entities, but there's this end customer, the audience, that should be a concern. And, you know, I think Frank was surprised by our students last fall.
Yeah, we asked the question about 16 or 18 students. And the question was, if a news organization or some news which had really great content was available to you, really liked the content, trusted, how many of you would pay for that?
Would what? I'm sorry.
How many would pay for that? So how many hands do you think are up?
Low. 0.
Two.
Yeah.
Probably because they expected you to have it. That was the answer you wanted, probably.
Well, I think it's more interesting than that. I think it's just there's a generation there that doesn't expect to pay.
No, I agree. I'm saying the two that said yes
Yeah.
probably really wouldn't in real life.
My response to you is that it's an unfair question. I can find a ton of great investigative reporting for free. I don't need to pay for it. Why would I pay for something that's free?
Good point.
And, you know, I don't think we have any answers. I mean, I read the little description here, and it makes us sound like miracle workers. And, I mean, I think that's sort of at the root of the problem that you have here, too, is how, you know, how is this ultimately going to be sustained down the road? You know, trying to find some of my notes. You know, because, like, I think Perry was saying, that triangle that used to be, you know, the customer that the news organization reaches, that the advertising is going to reach via the newspaper or the TV station, that model is failing. I guess to look at one of the things we did in our class that was pretty interesting was to look at, we had students do case studies of 5 different sort of media groups. One of them was iNews. One of them was Book Brewer that Dan Pacheco is from. See back there?
What's it called again?
Book Brewer. And it just was interesting. I think that one thing, there's a need for some business education out there. But it was interesting to see, you know, in one instance, one of these businesses had drawn up a contract with somebody. Can you talk about that?
I don't remember. Which one are you talking about?
Well, don't want to identify them, but they'd drawn up a partnership agreement with a developer and basically given them 50-50.
Well, there's this, some of the folks, like, you've kind of put yourself out there. You're getting started, and you're trying to figure out how to make your way here. Well, there's some basic stuff that you need to educate yourself on, and there's amazing resources out there for you to do that, about fundamentals of doing business. And when you start trying to sell a story, you're trying to do business at this point. So I think the point she's making is you can make some very naive mistakes at the beginning, which could be, well, I don't know about eliminated, but could certainly, you could be aware of the risks by doing some basic homework on what it takes to do business. And there are courses all over the place.
Well, what resources do you like?
Well, oh, you can come to the business school and take a degree. How's that?
And $40,000 later, you
Right.
can start your business.
We got 45 minutes.
Well, there's books that are out there about starting. All the dummy books are good books about starting business. I think they give you some good ideas. There's some great resources online, which I'll give you a little bit later. There's a book. There's an author that I like, particularly Guy Kawasaki. Anybody know him? He's an author from. He worked for Apple in the early days of Apple, and I think he's written a book called The Art of the Start, which I think is a great book. There's another book for people just getting started in business, which we actually use in the classroom. It's called The New Business Road Test by a guy named Jeff Mullins. So those are certainly two things that are well worth reading about things you need to think about when you're starting your business.
I think looking at some of the examples, like I think Dan Pacheco's business, Dan, is a great example of adapting something he'd been working on someplace else and evolving it to the point of being pretty flexible about what it was going to be and what it was going to do. But you also did a thing of where you went out there and started it and then started making fine-tuning things along the way. Whereas one of the other businesses our class looked at was somebody who just felt the need to perfect the code, and was also trying to support himself by doing consulting. So here's a person who's basically in their basement programming 24/7, and his gig is still not off the ground. And
Yeah, there's a temptation to think when you're trying to start something, you have to figure it all out before you start. And there's a great it's a subject that's being talked more and more in entrepreneurial academia. It's called effectuation. And what effectuation basically says, you just got to get in there and start it. You're not going to figure it all out to begin with. Whatever you think it is now when you start isn't the way it's going to wind up being. And the best thing you can do is just get working on whatever you want to do, and you will ultimately figure out what works or what doesn't work. Failure is a big part of that. You have to go out and fail a bunch of times. And I recommend this now to make this point with all entrepreneurs, is that you basically got to get started. And if you try to write the perfect business plan, it isn't going to happen. You're wasting your time. So that's kind of my take on what Dan has done, which is.
I can just throw in there too.
Yeah.
We started under an Knight Foundation grant. I'll get into that later, but at least the way they used to run the grants, and I think it's true of many grant bodies, it's actually very difficult to work that way. And so I've talked quite a bit with the Knight Foundation about how, over the last couple of years, and I think they're implementing some of this now, about need to allow for flexibility so that new things are discovered from your customer base while getting grant funds, so that you can then become sustainable at the end. But you have to be really careful when you're getting money from somebody, because they kind of tend to say, here's what you need to do, and then that's what you do.
Maybe you're responsible for this effect on Knight, but they now have at the Knight Digital Media Center an entrepreneurship boot camp, which is one of the things I did to educate myself to become not just a journalist, but a crazy talking business guru. And I highly recommend it for anyone. It talks just about going out and learn by failure.
The other thing, at least from what my experience is, we just, I think you do have to fail, and you have to go where you're going. But at least my dealing with foundations, I've been really clear. And I think what I've been able to do is go to them and say, look, I thought this was going to happen. It didn't. This is going to happen, and we're not going to do it. And it's looping them in when you're going to really change direction. And I think, at least I found them flexible. I haven't been told, and then sometimes you just say we're going to do it because this other stuff we thought we were going to do was wrong. And you just have to keep going. I had a question based on, if you don't mind,
No.
the 2 out of 18. Because this, I think, is a crucial thing, and we were sort of talking about this earlier in these new models, and again with the way information and stories and content is moving. See, I think a crucial challenge for us in this niche, and we're talking really about investigative reporting nonprofits, is to message and make the public, or at least the key sector, maybe it's the informational lead or whatever you want to call it, aware of the value of what we do. Not just to them in terms of it, because sure, you care about that, but the value to society. We actually used the phrase protecting democracy, which I never would have said when I was the editor of the Inquirer. It's just like sound too. But people really react to that, and they like it. And I think so the marketing and branding of what we're doing in terms of a global message, not individually, I think it's going to be a crucial piece, because 16 of those kids or students may never pay for it, but if they understand it, it's doing something that keeps something they care about going, or watchdogging, or keeping corporations honest, or government on track, then they might not pay for it, but they might end up paying, $25 a year to keep your organization going, or whatever. So I think strategically that's a way to go, and I think again, because of the way technology's going and social media and these massive groups of people around either geography or areas of interest, not just locally, but nationally and globally, and understanding your audience and going into that audience and getting that message to them is going to be part of what I can envision us doing. How you get there, I have no idea, but there are people smarter than me who can help me figure that out.
They will pay attention, and that's your first struggle, is to get them to pay attention. And you post something on Facebook that's about something that they're interested in. One of their peers posts an article that's even in the New York Times, and they're going to react to that and go, whoa, I'm going to post it too. So you try to get their attention. I think you look at what they're doing too. I mean, the apps thing, we talked about that, and how can you draw people in through some sort of thing that you can sell to them that they'll buy. I think about, right now we're districting census data. I look at the Des Moines Register's fun little redistricting map where you can try and get rid of Steve King, but probably it won't happen. And, they've got this really cool tool. Can you put that behind a paywall or sell it as an app for a phone? People have been talking a lot about data here, and that's something that can be really valuable to people, maybe not the younger generation, but to people in a more middle demographic age range. And can you put that behind a paywall or provide it as an application and let people use that for their own purposes?